Good morning. Welcome to the Stylo News Intelligence Update for July 10th, 2026. Over the next few minutes, we're going to give you a factual, comprehensive look at the global cyber domain, breaking down the major shifts in digital warfare and espionage we've tracked over the last 2 weeks. Let's just dive straight into the intel. Now, before we map out the current threat matrix, a quick note that today's explainer is brought to you by ProWave II. They're the developers behind Stylo Intel Ops, which is that advanced AI-powered open-source intelligence program used by governments and enterprises all over the world. They also created Stylo News, the commercial version that tracks global intelligence instantly across more than 20 languages. It's their technology that lets us take millions of data points and distill them into the clear, actionable insights we'll be reviewing this morning. All right, let's orient ourselves to the global theater. As we all know, the modern cyber landscape doesn't care about borders. Our intelligence from the past 2 weeks shows highly concentrated, high-confidence operations spanning the globe. We're talking from Washington, D.C. down to South America, straight across Eastern Europe, specifically with heavy activity in Ukraine and Poland, and extending deep into the Middle East and Asia. We are looking at a deeply interconnected global threat matrix here, and it demands immediate, round-the-clock situational awareness from both the public and private sectors. So, what are the primary patterns emerging from all this data? Well, a really fascinating, if concerning, trend is taking shape. State-linked hostile actors are increasingly converging with rogue criminal networks. We're currently tracking 4 principal state actors with medium to high confidence. First up, China. They're heavily focused on long-term, strategic prepositioning inside critical infrastructure, like energy and telecom grids, really prioritizing that persistent access. Then we have Russia, actively using hybrid warfare and proxy groups to conduct deniable disruptions, mostly against European and Ukrainian targets. Meanwhile, Iran is keeping up retaliatory operations aimed squarely at the telecom and energy sectors. And North Korea? They're still relying on financial cybercrime and crypto theft to generate revenue for the regime. On the flip side of all this, international law enforcement is pushing back hard. They recently launched Operation Endgame, which successfully disrupted major rogue networks tied to the Amadei and SteelC malware ecosystems. So how do these high-level threat patterns actually play out on the ground? The impacts are hitting locally, nationally, and internationally. At the local level, out in the Siak Regency of Indonesia, the government just formed a dedicated cyber incident response team to counter a rising tide of professional hacker-for-hire threats. Over in Poland, they're facing a parliamentary push to improve compensation just so they can stop losing their critical municipal IT specialists. Moving to the national stage, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, recently got access to Anthropic's advanced Mythos Preview AI model to help scan for vulnerabilities. At the same time, Brazil suffered a massive hack of its emergency alert system, and South Korea saw attacks on its election commission. And internationally, a pro-Russian group known as Throne managed to compromise the industrial controls at a Czech brewery, exposing some very real supply chain vulnerabilities. The cascade effect is undeniable. To really make sense of this battlefield, we have to look at the specific tactics being used. We're increasingly observing a very strict operational division of labor. On one side, you have your formal state actors. They are playing the long game, focusing heavily on long-term espionage, quietly infiltrating critical infrastructure, and setting up footholds for future geopolitical coercion. On the other side, you've got criminal proxies, like the pro-Russian group No Name 057. They handle the noisy, disruptive stuff, DDoS campaigns and ransomware. The critical takeaway here is that these criminal ecosystems act as force multipliers. They provide plausible deniability for state intelligence services, which allows nations to exert pressure and cause chaos without ever triggering a formal act of war. Let's pivot to the decision makers who actually have to navigate this complex environment. When it comes to adopting advanced defensive technologies in the U.S., official reports note an interesting pause. Even though CISA now has access to that powerful Mythos Preview AI model we mentioned, they're intentionally holding off on full deployment. Why? They're waiting for clear operational guidelines from the White House. It perfectly highlights a major reality in modern cyber defense. You can acquire cutting-edge artificial intelligence as fast as you want, but it absolutely must be balanced with strict, responsible policy frameworks to govern how it's used at the federal level. And we're seeing similarly pragmatic discussions happening in emerging economies. The Indonesia Cybersecurity Forum recently issued some strong warnings about the democratization of cyber weapons. They point out that hacker-for-hire groups are now operating with corporate-level professionalism, and that demands a structural response. Their proposed course of action actually moves away from purely technical fixes. Instead, they're emphasizing the urgent need for foundational digital literacy among the general public, combined with robust cross-sector cooperation between government and private industry to build long-lasting resilience. Now, you might be wondering, how is the broader cybersecurity community actually reacting to all of this? When we synthesize the sentiment data across social media, specifically on Platform X, the trend is incredibly encouraging. Despite the sheer volume of attacks escalating right now, our analysis shows a very high degree of situational awareness. The conversation isn't being driven by fear or emotional amplification, quite the opposite. There's a clear bias toward actionable defense, intelligence sharing, and discussions around regulatory adaptations, like the UK's cyber assessment framework. It's a mature, professional discourse that prioritizes rapid recovery, identity protection, and systemic resilience over panic. All right, based strictly on these established intelligence trends, here is what our forecast suggests you should be monitoring next. In the short term, over the next 24 hours, expect to see continued disruptive DDoS pressure hitting Polish and Ukrainian government and logistics sectors, courtesy of those pro-Russian proxy groups. Looking ahead over the coming weeks, the entire industry will be watching closely for the release of the White House AI guidelines, which will finally unlock the federal deployment of tools like the Mythos preview model. And in the long term, network defenders simply need to operate under the assumption of persistent, highly stealthy Chinese pre-positioning efforts embedded within global energy, water, and telecommunication grids. That wraps up our factual briefing for this morning. For a much deeper analysis of these events, I highly encourage you to check out our full morning explainer, State Hackers, Criminal Networks, and the New Cyber War. It's available right now. Just follow the link in this post. I want to thank you for your time today and for prioritizing clear, unbiased intelligence. To keep your situational awareness sharp, don't forget to subscribe to Stylo News for AI-powered news on demand over at stylonews.com. As statecraft and criminal enterprises become virtually indistinguishable in this new domain, we'll leave you with this thought. In a borderless digital war, is your organization just a bystander or are you the next battlefield? Have a good day.